The starfield outside the viewport of the Odyssey Vanguard stretched endlessly, a glittering tapestry of light and darkness. Captain Rylan Voss leaned back in his chair, swirling the amber glow of synthesized whiskey in his glass. The galaxy had a way of making a man feel both infinitesimal and invincible at the same time. And today, Rylan felt mostly invincible, or perhaps recklessly foolish. He had spent the last 3 years charting the outer rim sectors for the Interstellar Coalition, navigating regions where communication lagged by minutes and warp currents could tear a starship apart if one miscalculated even slightly. It was a lonely life, one suited perfectly for someone who preferred company only from the occasional AI or holographic simulation. But that had all changed the moment the Coalition issued a top-secret summons to the Empress herself. Rylan wasn't sure if he should have been flattered or terrified. Protocol dictated that only the galaxy's most elite explorers and strategists were invited to the Imperial Palace aboard the mobile Citadel, Aurelia Prime. But there he was, a scrappy ship captain with more luck than skill, standing before the most powerful ruler in known space. The day had started like any other. His ship had been pulled into a quantum tether that instantaneously transported him to the Aurelia Prime's orbit. A fleet of ceremonial escort frigates had surrounded him, gleaming like silver arrows against the void. The docking bay doors opened, revealing a hallway lined with holographic banners depicting the Empress's victories over pirates, rogue AIs, and even hostile civilizations. Each step Rylan took echoed in the marble corridor, making him painfully aware of his own mortality, or at least his social inadequacy. Finally, he was ushered into the throne room. It was vast beyond comprehension, a domed structure filled with softly glowing light, its walls adorned with swirling nebula murals. And there she was, Empress Solara Valen. Solara's presence was magnetic, almost gravitational. Her hair shimmered with an otherworldly silver hue, and her eyes, a deep violet, seemed to pierce right through Rylan's carefully constructed bravado. Dressed in an elegant robe that flowed like liquid starlight, she was more than a ruler. She was a force of nature. "Captain Voss," she said, her voice smooth and commanding, yet warm enough to unsettle him. "We have observed your expeditions. You've charted sectors thought impossible to navigate. Your resourcefulness is impressive." Rylan bowed, fighting the urge to stumble over his own words. "Thank you, Your Majesty. It's all part of the job." A subtle smile curved her lips. "And yet, your job seems to carry a streak of audacity. That is what intrigues me." Rylan chuckled nervously. "Audacity, ma'am? I try not to die too spectacularly in the process." Solara tilted her head slightly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "I sense a wit in you, Captain. A dangerous kind of wit. One that might survive my tests." He blinked. "Tests?" "Yes," she replied, leaning forward slightly. "I have a proposition for you. A matter of hypothetical matrimony." Rylan laughed, thinking she was joking. "Hypothetical matrimony, Your Majesty? You've got to be kidding." She did not laugh. Instead, she rose, her steps echoing like thunder across the chamber. "Do not take this lightly, Captain. In this galaxy, a word spoken lightly can become law if it carries the weight of authority." Rylan swallowed, suddenly aware that he might be in way over his head. What exactly is the proposition?" Solara's gaze was unwavering. "I am Empress of the Valen Dominion. My people, my empire, they are vast, yet I am bound by tradition. Tradition dictates that I marry a worthy partner, one capable of navigating both diplomacy and danger. I have observed you. I believe you may be suitable." Rylan's jaw dropped. You're considering me for marriage?" She inclined her head. You may consider it a test of courage or a challenge to your wit. Either way, Captain, I am offering you a choice. Speak your mind. And then, in a moment of reckless absurdity, Rylan grinned and quipped, Well, Your Majesty, if we're doing hypotheticals, I suppose I'd have to say yes. I accept your offer. The room went silent. Even the hovering AI attendants seemed to pause. Solara's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. Accepted. Without hesitation, Rylan raised his hands defensively. I was joking. I didn't. She cut him off with a soft laugh, the kind that sent shivers down his spine. No, Captain. I think you might be the only one brave or foolish enough to speak with such honesty. I accept as well. And just like that, the joke became reality. The next weeks were a whirlwind of ceremonial protocols, interstellar politics, and the dizzying expectations of being engaged to an empress. Rylan found himself navigating a maze of etiquette he had never known existed. He learned the nuances of court diplomacy, from interpreting alien gestures to negotiating with multi-species guilds. Every misstep was noted, every success magnified. Yet, despite the pressure, he found himself fascinated by Solara. She was more than just an empress. She was a strategist, a philosopher, and a warrior. Her insight into the galaxy's politics was unmatched, yet she treated him as a partner rather than a subordinate. You handle crises well, he said one evening as they floated above the cityscape of Varelia Prime. Neon spires reached skyward, their lights reflecting on the vast oceans below. Most would crumble under the weight of observation and expectation. You don't. Rylan shrugged, trying to appear modest while feeling like he'd just been given a medal for existing. Maybe I just haven't realized how heavy it is yet. Solara laughed softly, reaching out to touch his hand. Perhaps. Or perhaps you've already risen to it, and don't yet understand your own strength. For the first time, Rylan felt a connection deeper than flattery or fear. The Empress was not untouchable. She was human in ways he hadn't expected. And in her presence, he realized that his own humor, his bravado, and even his mistakes were not only tolerated, they were welcomed. But reality had a way of intruding, even in the most splendid palaces. News came that the Drakari Marauders, a coalition of rogue warlords, had captured one of the outer colonies. The Imperial fleet would not arrive in time to prevent mass casualties. Solara turned to him, her expression uncharacteristically serious. Captain Voss, I need you to lead a small strike team. The Marauders must be contained before they reach the colony's central hub. Rylan's stomach twisted. Me? But I'm capable, Solara interrupted firmly. You've proven it. And more importantly, you're willing to act when others hesitate. That is why I chose you. The mission was perilous. Rylan assembled a team of elite pilots, engineers, and soldiers. Their vessel, the Silver Hawk, slipped through warp currents like a shadow, undetected by the Marauder sensors. What followed was a tense ballet of strategy and combat. Rylan's unconventional thinking, honed by years of solo exploration, allowed them to outmaneuver the Marauder fleet. In the heat of battle, as his ship skidded past a plasma barrage, he realized something remarkable. He wasn't acting alone. Every decision Solara had subtly trained him to make, every lesson she had imparted in court, came into play. He was not just surviving, he was leading with precision. By the time the mission ended, the Marauders were routed, the colony was saved, and the team hailed Rylan as a hero. But amidst the adrenaline and celebration, his mind kept drifting back to Solara. He realized then that what had begun as a flippant remark had transformed into a profound bond. The days following the victory were filled with official commendations and private moments of reflection. Rylan found himself wandering the palace gardens at night, the twin moons casting silver shadows across the bioluminescent flora. Celera joined him, her presence calm and grounding. "You've changed," she said softly, watching him adjust the trajectory of a floating drone that illuminated the gardens. I suppose I have," Rylan admitted. "Being engaged to an Empress tends to do that." Celera smiled, but it was tinged with something deeper. "You've grown into your courage, Rylan. Not just the kind that faces danger, but the kind that opens a heart and trusts another. That is rare." Rylan swallowed, finally speaking the truth he had been avoiding. "I never expected any of this. Not the Empress, not the politics, not any of it. But I didn't expect to feel this way either." Her eyes softened, and she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "And what is that?" "Connected. Safe, even when the galaxy feels like it's falling apart." Celera leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. Then perhaps the joke wasn't a joke at all. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything Rylan could have imagined. Ships from across the Dominion and allied civilizations filled the skies above Aurelia Prime. Dignitaries, warriors, and civilians alike gathered to witness the union. Celera walked down a luminous aisle, her starlit gown trailing behind her, and Rylan, standing at the altar, felt the weight of responsibility and wonder all at once. When they exchanged vows, it was not a formality. Every word resonated with truth, with courage, and with the acknowledgement of the galaxy's infinite uncertainties. "I accept you, Rylan Voss," Celera said, her voice echoing across the dome. "Not as a subject, not as a subordinate, but as a partner, a confidant, and a husband." Rylan's voice was steady, even as his heart raced. "And I accept you, Celera Valen, not as an Empress, not as a legend, but as the woman I choose to stand with through every star, every battle, and every tomorrow." When the Empress looked him in the eyes and said, "I accept," Rylan realized that the galaxy was far more beautiful and far more terrifying than he had ever imagined. And yet, with Celera beside him, he felt ready to face whatever the cosmos could throw at them. Life after marriage was a balance of duty and discovery. Together, Rylan and Celera navigated political intrigues, alien diplomacy, and threats that spanned light years. Yet, amid the grandeur, they discovered joy in small things. Quiet nights aboard the Aurelia Prime, clandestine spacewalks under twin stars, and the simple pleasure of shared laughter. Rylan never again joked lightly about life or love. Yet, sometimes when they were alone, he would glance at Celera and whisper, "Remember when this all started as a joke?" Celera would smile, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Yes." And somehow it turned out perfectly. And in the endless expanse of the galaxy, amidst stars and battles and the pulse of civilizations, Rylan Voss finally understood what it meant to truly accept a life, not just with an Empress, but with someone who made even the darkest corners of space feel like home. Life after the wedding was a new kind of adventure. The galaxy didn't pause because two people had exchanged vows. It accelerated. Reports of uprisings, rogue fleets, and ancient AI rebellions arrived daily aboard the Aurelia Prime. But for the first time in his life, Rylan felt he had an anchor in the storm of cosmic politics, Celera. Their first mission as partners was diplomatic. A neutral system on the fringe of the Dominion had declared independence, threatening trade routes and stability. Most advisors recommended overwhelming force, but Celera turned to Rylan. "What do you think?" she asked, leaning over the star maps with that same violet gaze that had ensnared him months ago. Rylan studied the coordinates, the patrol patterns, and the political nuances. Force would work, he admitted cautiously. But force will make enemies, not allies. I think we need a calculated approach. Show them respect, but remind them of the consequences. Celera smiled. I like that. Let's do it your way. The mission was tense. Rylan and Celera coordinated their fleet with precision, offering trade agreements and strategic partnerships while subtly positioning forces to prevent resistance. By the end, the system remained loyal, convinced that the Dominion's power was both benevolent and uncompromising. Rylan realized he had never felt more alive and more trusted. But not all victories were tactical. Some were deeply personal. On quiet nights, when the palace hummed with energy, but they had a moment alone, they explored the smaller joys of life. Floating through the gardens under Aurelia Prime's twin moons, Celera taught Rylan to recognize the subtle cues of alien flora, the way the bioluminescent petals responded to emotional resonance. You see, she said one evening, placing his hand on a glowing blossom, even the smallest life forms have wisdom if you know how to read them. Rylan looked at her, realizing she was speaking as much to him as to the flower. Then I guess I have a lot to learn. Celera's laugh was gentle, melodic. We always do, Captain. That's the point. As years passed, the galaxy began to see them as a singular force. Empress Celera Valen and Captain Rylan Voss were no longer just ruler and consort. They were legends, a team capable of both diplomacy and war, adventure and love. Together, they explored uncharted sectors, brokered peace between warring systems, and protected colonies from threats both known and unimaginable. Yet, amid the grandeur, Rylan never forgot the moment it all began. A joke, a glimmer of courage, and a simple phrase that became the foundation of a partnership spanning stars. He often recalled that day in the throne room when he had dared to speak flippantly, and Celera had met it with sincerity. One evening, years later, they stood once again on the observation deck of Aurelia Prime. The galaxy stretched before them like a tapestry of light, nebulae swirling in colors too magnificent to name. Celera leaned against him, her hand resting on his. You've changed the way I see the galaxy, she said softly. And you've changed the way I see myself, Rylan replied. I was reckless back then, but somehow the joke led to all of this. To us. Celera turned, lifting his chin so their eyes met. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, Captain, but it also knows what it's doing. It chose you as much as I did. Rylan smiled, finally understanding the depth of that choice. Then let's keep exploring it together. As they gazed into the stars, Rylan realized that the galaxy was infinite, full of danger, wonder, and endless possibility, but so was love. And when you dared to speak a joke from a heart, sometimes the universe answered with something far more extraordinary than you could ever imagine. In that moment, the Empress and the Captain stood side by side, ready to face every star, every threat, and every adventure, together. And somewhere deep in the cosmos, the galaxy itself seemed to shimmer, as if acknowledging that this union, born of humor and courage, was exactly what it had been waiting for.